Welcome to the Money GPS. Today I've got an interview with Uneducated Economist, and we talk about inflation versus deflation. We talk about lumber. We talk about commodities, futures, ETFs. A lot was discussed here. I have the timestamps in the description as well as the comments if you're interested in checking that out. But I recommend watching the whole thing if you have time. Let's get into it right away. Okay, so thank you very much for being on today. I wanted to talk about several topics here. I wanted to get into inflation and deflation. We're going to look at lumber, so many other topics. And I just wanted to thank you for being on today.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you very much for having me, Dave.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you've got an excellent YouTube channel. You've got a lot of content being posted very regularly. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that I think it's important that people listen to differing views all the time. We can't simply just look at one aspect and think this is the be all and end all. And that's really what I wanted to bring you on today to talk about, because I know there's the inflation deflation debate. There's a lot of people that are simply in one camp and stick to it, and that's it. And so, that really takes me to my first question: inflation versus deflation. Where do you see it? And specifically, how this relates to what we are seeing today and what we could see in the future.
Yeah, it's really hard to try and fight that deflationary scenario when you hear so much about inflation taking place. Now, everybody out there, they have this inflation is starting to come in, and I have a feeling that it's going to be more about a deflationary scenario after this inflationary push. Um, and it's kind of like I said, it's really hard to try and kind of wrap your head around that. Everywhere you look, you're seeing the prices going up, especially if you look in places like lumber and commodities, copper, stuff like that. These things are really just kind of screaming higher. And when I think about how it is that the Federal Reserve has injected this money into the system, I have a tendency to believe that once all this stimulus is run out, we are going into a deflationary spiral. And that's my honest belief behind it.
Interesting. So now something that I've thought a lot about is that you've got the quantitative easing side, and then you've also got the, let's say, what the government is doing with the stimulus. And I'm wondering if there's going to be a time when we move not necessarily away from the quantitative easing, but we start doing the helicopter money, and people start getting these massive stimulus checks into their bank on a regular basis, so that people are literally going out and spending all this money, and they are actively trying to create the maximum amount of inflation. So there's like the two sides of it. And that's something that I've really debated with myself, especially over the last while. Because if they pump money in with the quantitative easing, that could, of course, drop the monetary velocity. But then on the other side, you've got stimulus programs and what they are talking about with the MMT, bringing that in and putting that money into people's accounts. And I wonder, I question what will happen. Do you have any thoughts about that? Like the two, sort of the two sides of this?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Now, the the modern monetary theory and the UBI scenario, the only way that can really be effective is if the Federal Reserve started injecting that money directly in. Now, you think about it, the way they're doing it now is with the Treasury purchases. Like, the Treasury actually has to be like, stimulating the economy. If the Federal Reserve took that role, like they were actually printing up money and then injecting that directly into the wallets of the people, yeah, we would be seeing some serious inflation from something like that. But instead, it's not going that route. It runs through the debt system. So it's actually loaned into the existence. Now, that loaning into the existence, it's going toward consumerism. Like it's not going towards a productive capacity where it's going to pay back the loan plus interest. It's going to go and it's going to consume a bunch of stuff. Well, at the end of the consumption, you still have the debt to pay. So then you have to postpone your current consumption to pay for the past spending that you've done. That's the deflationary event that's going to come afterwards. So what the Treasury and the Fed are going to have to do in combination is try and inject that money, like you're saying, with the helicopter money. But they don't really have a system that's going to do that correctly. They have to do like the Treasury stimulus, like the stimulus packages. And so it would have to be like these two working together. And That's going to be politically unfriendly when you have that much debt being taken out by the Treasury. So again, it goes back to the role of the Federal Reserve, and they don't really have the laws that allow them to do that yet. So I don't see it happen. Could that change? Can Congress change that? Yeah, absolutely. And if they do, then yeah, look out. But at this point, I don't see that happening as of yet.
Interesting. I think we should spend a minute here to define inflation specifically. How do you define inflation? Because if you look at the sort of the Austrian economic side, they define it as the expansion of the monetary supply. But if we're looking at inflation as it relates to, what the mainstream media covers, that would be more like price inflation. So do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, and that is really because I look at it more on the Austrian side of things. Like inflation is the expansion of money and credit. It already has happened. The idea that there's going to be inflation in the future is not really an argument. The inflation is already here. It's already occurred. What we're waiting for, or what we're trying to see, is the price inflation, like the Federal Reserve wants to see it. They want to see the price increases. That's the result of inflation. So, like the idea of like whether or not we're going to have inflation, that's not like even an argument anymore. I mean, that's like it's already here. We're waiting for the prices. We need to see it come up in the prices. And mainly, I'm looking for it in wages and gold. Those are like the two that I'm still waiting on seeing. Like everybody else can point at these different commodities, but like I have a reason to see. I mean, I don't think it's a good reason as far as like seeing the prices as high as they are, but I understand the reasonings why lumber has achieved the level that it has. And I don't see it as a destruction of the dollar. I see it as a supply constraint. So that's where I see the difference between like what a lot of people are considering inflation and what I consider inflation. I'm just looking for like the destruction of the dollar kind of thing. And I would see that in wages and gold. And I'm not quite seeing it quite the way that I would like to see inflation, or what I would expect to see in inflation.
Got you. Um, Now, obviously, we got to talk about lumber here a little bit more specifically. Over this last, let's say, year or so, you know, from your point of view, what have you been seeing? I mean, obviously, we're looking at prices rising, but when I go back to the charts, I've never really seen anything like this before in such a dramatic spike. If you could give your
Yeah.
insight, that I would appreciate that.
Yeah, you've bet. This is an interesting one. I don't think we can go back a year. I think we have to go back a couple of years in order to really understand what's happened here in the lumber industry. Because I've been working lumber since I was 18 years old. Since 1995, I got my first job at a hardware store working, retail lumber. And I've been either in the construction game, like doing construction, or selling building supplies pretty much my entire life. And I have never seen anything quite like what we have experienced over the last couple of years. Now, in order to really truly understand this, we have to take it back to like um I would say probably somewhere around 2017, 2018, when the prices really were spiking up for the first time. They ran up to 650 per thousand. When that happened, that was like the first time that it had ever achieved a level over 500 per thousand. And everybody was like, my gosh, this is huge. Well, I remember walking through my lumber yard, the place that I work, and it was just full of Canadian lumber. Like every single unit was from Canada. Well, I didn't think much about it. I knew that, that's a major export, from Canada coming into the United States. We're up in the Pacific Northwest. So it kind of made sense that we would have a lot of Canadian lumber. Well, then I started reading articles about how these Canadian lumber mills were starting to shut down, especially in the BC area. They started curtailing development. Now, I'm just going to try and shorten it up real quick, but what ended up happening is that British Columbia had gone into something called salvage mode, and they had fires and bug infestations, and they needed to cut these trees before they rotted. Right. So instead of just wasting the trees, they cut them, milled them, sent them down to the United States. When that salvage mode ended, that was pretty much it for the British Columbia area. And they there had mills up there that really suffered from this increase in the stumpage fees, which is what they charged the loggers to cut the trees, essentially. So the logs became very expensive and the lumber was hard to get coming out of the British Columbia area. Now, that was at the end of 2019. This is before COVID, before any of that other stuff. There was issues taking place up in that British Columbia area. Then COVID hit and the mills started shutting down and the whole inventory depletion started taking place. So the whole pipeline just completely just broke down to almost nothing. There was hardly any material in the system. British Columbia, that chain of material coming out of that area coming into the United States, had shifted and went down to the southern part of the United States. So now here we are, we're trying to fill this pipeline back up again with lumber, trying to get this steady flow of material that once had a continuous flow coming out of British Columbia has now moved down to the southern part of the United States. And we have trucking issues and rail issues, and there's a whole lot of not getting this material flowing through the system properly. So now it's really clunky. Like particular areas might get a whole bunch of lumber, and people are like, man, look at all the stacks of lumber everywhere, while a whole another section of the country sits dry. And this is like creating this, demand for this material to go up to any price. Because if you're a builder building a home, you're going to pay any price to get your material so that you can get that construction done. And if one builder's willing to pay, the rest of them are going to have to suffer with that price as well. Yeah. And
Wow,
it's not just one
very
builder,
interesting.
one builder. You know what I mean? It's like
Of
if
course.
there's a section of builders that are doing it.
Of course. So that really was one of the points I wanted to talk about, was how this really differed from the previous years. So there's always going to be shortages. There's always going to be supply chain issues that happen. We had the tariffs going on just prior to that, and that affected many different products, and it was a big issue for many industries. But certainly right now, today, we've never really seen such a spike in the prices all at the same time. And I think that's kind of what has generated a lot of the fear at this point. And, regardless, I think that people should be essentially keeping an eye on where they've got their investments, and not necessarily going pedal to the metal on all of this, because there is a risk, whether that risk is on the inflationary side, whether it's on the deflationary side. I think it's important people be aware of that, and not necessarily overextend themselves in either direction, because I know that there's some people who are just 100% high growth, high margin type of stock investor, and then you've got other people who are just sitting and waiting for a period of time that may or may not happen. So that's sort of a concern that I always think about as an investor, and what people can do, practical advice and so on. Um, you know, what the next question I had was, what can we learn specifically from this price search? Is there any lesson that can be learned? Like, this can absolutely happen a year from now, or anything that you think that we should be learning from this.
Well, something that I guess if there was anything that I have learned from watching the events take place is that it's not everything is seems to be what the way it is. Like I guess for example, and I talked about this a little bit before in one of my other videos, is that last year when I was selling lumber, I had a heck of a time trying to source out particular units of lumber, and mainly it was pressure treated 4x4. This is like the main component to getting a deck built, for fences, for everything. So there was a huge demand surge when everybody got locked down and had a stimulus check. They ran down to the lumber yard and started buying all this material to make their outdoor living a little bit better space. And they pretty much zapped the inventory levels at the same time. There was a depletion coming from, an inventory drop coming from the mills. So if anything that I have learned from it is that at the time when there was no supply, the the prices really hadn't surged. I mean, they ticked up a bit, but they weren't like off the charts. This year, I have 4x4s. I have everything I need in the yard. I mean, sometimes it's hard to source out like a particular unit. Like the other day, I tried to get a unit of 2x610 standard and better, and I couldn't find one anywhere in the Portland area. Now, next week, I'll probably be there, but this week it wasn't. But the rest of the stuff, I have it, but the prices are off the charts. So I see this lag kind of happening, from like the availability to where the price goes. And I thought that was kind of interesting, something I had never seen before. So I'm learning like a lot about like where prices are to the supply and demand at the time that they are. I mean, it doesn't seem to like necessarily coincide perfectly with each other.
Right,
Being
right.
last year with 4x4s completely gone, you would think that the prices would be off the charts. This year I got the 4x4s and the prices are off the charts. So, you know,
I really think that a lot of what we see with the prices, whether it's gold, whether it's commodities, doesn't matter. I really think that a lot of that has to do with the speculation that goes on in the markets, and that they push these prices up, they push them down, whatever it might be. And, I really get the sense of that over the years. You've seen, I know you've seen it. there are so many instances where people get caught manipulating the price of precious metals. And then what happens? They just give a slap on the wrist to that trader at that particular company. Oh, that's it, problem solved, right? But we know it's really not. We know that they are modifying and manipulating the different prices to suit their own needs. And of course, this could be happening again today. They see the surge up, so everybody's getting in, buying the lumber futures and so on. If you have any thoughts about that.
Well, absolutely, I do. In fact, I thought this was something that I was suspecting has taken place. Is that with all the story of all the shortages taking place across the nation, that there was speculation starting to take place inside of the lumber futures, and watching it run up to 1,700 per thousand, while at the same time I'm sitting on lumber that's selling for or retailing at $9, and the future price is starting to exceed what I'm selling the retail for. I'm like, nah, this isn't right. There's something wrong here, because ultimately, I mean, obviously, it, you can't go down and like buy all this retail lumber, build 110,000 Ford feet and sell a futures contract. But ultimately, that's like what you could have done. You could have gone down to the retail stores, put together 110,000 Ford feet of lumber, and it would have been cheaper than buying a futures contract. And that just seemed completely out of line. That doesn't seem right at all. Now, I kind of wondered if, like, coming into this particular week, because this is the week that this May contract ends, is today actually. I think it was tomorrow at the 15th, I think is what it's scheduled for. But anyway, it's supposed to end today. Well, I looked at the contract, or looked at the future price before we started this. It dropped 90 per thousand. Now, that's the biggest 1 day drop I think I've ever seen in lumber. And it closes today. And it was dropping, well, not yesterday, but the day before and the day before that. So it leads me to believe that there was some speculation taking place in this market. Those guys were trying to get out of those contracts. So I don't know. I
Right.
mean, I guess we'll find out again next month when that one opens up, and we'll see where the prices go. But I have
For
a
sure.
feeling that we're going to start seeing the lumber prices dropping from here. I think 1,700 was just far out of line. $12 for a 2x4 stud is just unrealistic. It doesn't need to be there. And things that can't go on forever won't.
Good points. Now, in terms of if somebody wanted to, if you have any input, if somebody wants to invest in something like lumber or like any commodity, would you suggest? And you let me know what you think. But would somebody get into the futures? Do you think that's the right thing to do? Do you think they should buy the physical? Do you think that they should get into ETFs? At all? Do you think this is something that people should be looking at as an investment, or people should not be doing that and simply stick to stocks and precious metals and so on?
Um, So I'm going to tell you, I am not much for investment. I am not a very good investor. I try to save my money. I try to put it in things that I see have little downside risk. So that's what I kind of really do with my money. I know that some people have used my information to make money in the, whether it's the futures that they were playing or something. But and I kid you not, I had a guy who claimed to be from a hedge fund, who says, "Hey, man, I really appreciate all the lumber insight. I made a bunch of money off of one of the trades, just off of it, solely off of your information. And I just wanted to thank you." I emailed him back saying, "Hey, man, right on. I'm glad you were able to do that. I have no idea how to make money inside of the market. So I'm glad somebody was able to use that information for good." A couple of minutes later, he tipped me on PayPal a couple $100, says, "There's your commission, bro." And I went,
Nice.
whoa, right on. And I was just like, I didn't even know how to do, like, make money with this. But yeah, he was able to use my information for it. I know that lumber, especially the futures, is a very, very illiquid market. Getting in and out of that thing is not something that is very easy to do. So if you're like a speculator in this market who's not prepared to deal with that contract at the closing of that contract, I wouldn't even begin to think about, playing with
For
that
sure.
side of things. However, there are some ETFs that I guess would probably be a good trade that you could get into, that kind of track global forestry products that, might not, have been a bad play to get into a while ago. But I don't think right now would be the way that you would want to get in, unless you want to try and short that somehow. But then again, there's still, like, I ran out of 2x610s the other day and I couldn't get a unit. So there's still supply chain issues. There's still shortage. And when there's that shortage in there, there are people out there who are willing to pay at any price. So I don't know. I really don't know where to go with that.
Gotcha. Now, before we talk about your YouTube channel specifically, I just wanted to know if you have any particular tips at all as it relates to lumber, as it relates to commodities and so on. Do you have any insight for my viewers? I know we share a lot of the same viewers, but for anybody, do you have any tips that you think you could provide to them?
Um, I guess if you are a builder or you are looking at somebody who's going to do the project, and as far as the things that I have seen, you're looking to try and get that best deal or the best prices on the markets for it. Lumber futures, the price between where that changes and by the time it hits the retail, there's a lag behind that by quite a bit. And depending on how much material the lumber yards are moving at the time will depend on how far out that lag changes. So when you're looking to think, I'm going to try and nail the pricing just perfect, if you see the futures price drop today, well, it's going to be sometime in the future out there before you see the retail dropping. So even though like it doesn't seem like realistic to try, like you want to get the best deal, well, the best deal is when it doesn't seem like it's the best deal, and that's when you have to start your project, because by the time you get to purchasing it, it's also going to be down the road. That nailing of the timing is very difficult. So that's what I would say is like, watch how much inventory is moving at your lumber yard. That'll determine how quickly the price to the futures is going to be once it gets to the retail. I don't know if that makes sense the way I'm saying it, but that's what I would do. Like if your lumber yard is just like, you go down there and you still see the same unit of studs that's been sitting there for a week, they're not ripping through their inventory, and that price reflection isn't going to happen for a while. But if you go down there and that like, no, they're pumping out lumber every day, well, they're going to be a lot closer to that futures price when the price drops.
Nice. Okay. Do you have any sort of final input on maybe inflation, deflation, or what you see going on right now in the whole economy in general? I'm just interested in your thoughts. Want to know what you think.
Um, I think what's happening right now, at least from the experience that I've had talking with some of the other business owners and stuff around town, is that people are not so eager to go back to work. They want to finish out that stimulus. They want to finish out their unemployment. They want to enjoy not working for a while before they go back to being employed. And I have a feeling that that in itself is going to put them in a situation in which that by the time the money runs out, the jobs won't be there any longer. Because I kind of explained it in a video that I did yesterday that once these like restaurants, like I know a few restaurants in town that are having issues as far as getting staffing to them. And I know what everybody's going to say. Well, if the restaurants paid more, then they would go back to work. So we take that into consideration. The restaurant starts paying the employees more, which in turn is the cost push inflation. If land, materials, labor goes up, then so does the end product. So now all of a sudden, the burgers and pizzas and everything that everybody's selling has gone up in price, which is cool while the stimulus is running through the system. But once the stimulus is gone and that free money is gone, people aren't so willing to go and work to buy that expensive burgers anymore, the expensive pizzas, and this will have that deflationary impact. So that's where I'm kind of like thinking that by the time the stimulus runs out, the jobs won't be there any longer, and all these help wanted signs will be taken down.
I've been really pondering this for a while. I look at what we're seeing with the push for MMT, the push for more and more stimulus, never ending stimulus checks. And I just wonder, with so much debt, with such terrible deficits, with interest rates already being at rock bottom, what more can they really do? And that's, of course, where I start looking at that deflationary side of things. And the response, of course, historically has always been to destroy the currency. They
Yeah.
always try to inflate that currency as much as possible. So I always look at both sides and I just wonder, how far are they willing to go? I didn't think that they would print this much money. I didn't think that they would do this much stimulus. Like, look at the situation with Canada. If you're unemployed, you're getting $2,000 a month every single month. It's not just one stimulus check, one round of it. It's some seriously heavy duty cash being thrown out there. And you look at what's happening with the housing prices. Everybody is buying homes right now. Small sliver of land, maybe 20 feet wide in a nice area. I'm not talking about the fancy areas, but a nice area is going for, this is Canadian dollar, let's say 1.5 million and up for a 20-foot wide lot. And this is not even a lot of that is a semi-detached or a duplex home. So this is unbelievable to see 100-year-old homes, 20-foot sliver of land, and the prices are just rising like crazy. It's obviously a bubble. There's no reason why this should be up in these territories, but here we are. So I'm just interested to see it. I just document it, as you know. I just bring to you, the facts of what I see, and we can obviously speculate, but only time will tell.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
yeah,
there will be a time. I mean, there will be a time where there will be continuous injections of money. I mean, it's going to happen. It's just like the timeline for that. I just don't think we're going to step right into this, continual injection
right,
of money. I think that things will, you know, the stimulus will dissipate. There will be some downtime. There will come an event that will force the government to react, and then that's when they'll be able to introduce this MMT stuff. Now, like I said, they already have like an idea of how they're going to do all this. I mean, they're going to use the central bank digital currencies. They'll use like, I mean, I've read documents from the Federal Reserve and the Treasury talking about how they plan on using these special bonds, like these special bonds that sit on like idle, waiting for an event to take place that the Treasury can then automatically buy and inject the money right into the people's wallets. So these Treasury bonds, they're not like the Treasury even has to do anything. It's just a triggering event, like the economy hits a particular level, and all of a sudden these treasuries are there for the Fed to buy. It just magically happens to come about, but they were already sitting and waiting for this particular event to happen. So stuff like that. I mean, nobody sees that coming. Nobody knows about those things. I mean, because it's not like something that's outwardly talked about or even documented. I mean, this was something that was brought up in a blog or something, from
of
the
course.
IMF or whatever, that I was reading. I'm like, wow, that's an interesting way to go about it, because these things don't exist yet, right? It's just the
Right.
idea, right?
Yeah, they're definitely going to go into every new territory to try and manipulate and do things. I believe they manipulate on the way up and the way down, and
Absolutely.
like I said,
I mean,
only
nobody
time will
saw
tell.
those special purpose vehicles and stuff like that during the financial crisis. I mean,
Right.
nobody anticipated all that stuff. I
Of
mean,
course.
they knew about it. They knew they were going to do it. And somebody out there, I mean, there was people who knew about it, but not like, us who are just, kind of reading the news and stuff like that.
That's
Those
right.
special purpose vehicles popped up and everybody's like, look at that.
They found the way right around
Right around it.
their the things that keep them where they are, which is already too much as it is. But so one last thing, I just wanted to mention the fact that your YouTube channel, the way that you've created your content, it's in your car. It's not necessarily a high, a Hollywood budget type of scenario, and yet
Got
you've
the
had
guy
so
mowing in the
much.
backyard.
Yeah, like you've got you've got so much success so far, and I think that's amazing. And really, what I wanted to highlight for people is that if you have a message, if you have information, you can share that and you could actually provide value to the community. Now, whether that's going to be 100 subscribers or 60,000 subscribers or 250 and so on, if you have something of value, you should be sharing it. Okay. Like when I first did my videos, and I'm sure same situation with you, nobody was watching. I was the only one watching. I was going through my own video and seeing, what did I do? And this is now 10 years that I've been doing this. And, to me, I'm going to be making videos regardless of whether people are watching or not. I'm glad that so many people are watching. But, I just wanted, if you could give people the message, what you think, maybe with your own success that you've had, but just the message of that we should be sharing and we should be giving what we can, because as you see, somebody right here who has insight on a topic can then provide value to so many others out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Ha- It's kind of funny because I try to encourage as many people as I know. Everybody says, "Man, I love your YouTube channel." I'm like, "Yeah, you should start your own." Like I try to like pick up your hobby, whatever it is that you're doing, and just start talking about it, putting videos out there about it. Like even if it's just your day, this like walking down the river walk here, talk about something and post it on YouTube. When I started this thing, I never expected it to go anywhere. I never did. I mean, if you knew me personally, I never stopped talking. Like, I don't know if it's an obsessive compulsive thing that I got going or whatever, but like literally people at times are like, dude, okay, you're gonna have to stop. All right. And so like they said, you gotta start a blog, you gotta start, a channel or something. And so I did. I went down one day, I grabbed my phone, I went down to my car and I just blah, blah, blah. This is the Uneducated Economist. And I posted it. Never thought in a million years that anything would ever come from it. But the next day, I think I did another video. A couple days later, I did another video. Nobody watched them. Nobody at all. Zero views. And I did that for a while. And I think like my mom and my wife would watch, to try and give me a little bit of encouragement on it. But I got to thinking to myself, it was just like, I'm just going to do this. If nothing else, I'll just do it for my own, like just journal, just so I kind of remember the things that I was talking about and thinking about as far as the economy goes. Well, YouTube's out there and it's able to go to anybody. And, I started catching a few views and, a couple of people started encouraging me. They're like, man, don't stop what you're doing. Just keep doing this. And I was in my car just because it was quiet. Like, well, not today because of the guy mowing his lawn, but I was in my car because it was a quiet place to be, and it was easy to like kind of get away from like the noise of the house and the car, the dog, and everything else. So I didn't get in my car thinking like this is going to be my studio. I'm going to make my studio here, and this is where I'm going to do it. It just happened to land in the car. And as far as everything that I was doing on it, I was just trying to follow basically what the people were asking me to do. And that was just keep doing your opinions. Just, get out there, do the research, think about it in a way that, people can have a conversation about it. So I just kept doing that. And I found these complex topics out there that no way anybody was ever going to ever have a conversation about. And I thought about them for the day and I'm thinking, okay, well, how can I spit this out in 5 minutes so that everybody can understand it and talk about it? And I realized that, man, that's a talent in itself just to be able to do that. So I just kept pushing that idea out there. I would take these complex ideas and break them down in a way that everybody can understand it. And that was my niche. I had this lumber, I had that little bit of macroeconomics view that I could use, and I just kept rolling with it. But the point being is that I didn't use anything more than a cell phone and the internet for information. And anybody, like, it doesn't matter who you are or where you're at, anybody could have done this. Now, I guess I do have kind of a gift to just keep kind of talking and not stop. So that does help for being able to like, have videos that I don't have to edit and stuff like that, which, works out really well. But ultimately, if I wanted to do this on fishing or anything out there, I mean, any hobby you got, you could just do these videos and try and attract a crowd and have a conversation about it. I encourage everybody to have a YouTube channel. I mean, these YouTube is the greatest thing ever.
Great. Excellent. I appreciate that. Like he was just saying, everybody listening, share what you've got, whether it is on this platform, whether it's maybe in a podcast form, a blog form, anywhere. We need to be sharing what we've got and not necessarily worry about the views. He wasn't concerned about the views, but he still pushed on. Same thing with me. It's all about, trying to organize your thoughts. As an investor, that helps as well. Simply by stating what you believe in, then you start to make sense of it, or you realize, no, wait, there's a hole there. There's a hole in there, and I need to search that more. I need to study that more, and so on. So anyway, I
Absolutely.
want to I want to thank you for your time today. I know all my viewers really appreciated you being on behalf of them. I thank you as well. Where can we find you? Of course, your channel, but anywhere else, if people want to contact you or see what you've got.
Yeah. So we're trying to cover all the social medias. If you type Uneducated Economist into the Google, you're gonna find it all. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all those other places. But ultimately, I'm active on YouTube. I'm active in the comment section. That's where I'm at. But I do have all the social medias out there. If you want to send me an email, uneducatedeconomist@gmail.com. I get a lot of emails, so I try to respond to everybody, but there is some that do slip through the cracks there. So I do apologize for if I don't get back to you guys. Just send me another one. I'll try to respond to that one. But yeah, ultimately, I'm active on YouTube in the comments section. I put out the question out there, and we try to have a conversation, and it's awesome. I love my channel.
Perfect. Thank you very much again, and take care. Have a good one.
You too, David. Thank you very much.